Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over some colder temperatures in the northern plains, but we're going to mainly focus on some snow which is going to be possible, especially for the Rockies and also into some parts of Nebraska and Kansas. So I know I have a few viewers from there who have been asking about the snowfall threat. We're not going to have the snowfall forecast in today's video just because there is still a lot that the models are disagreeing on, but I'm thinking that probably by Saturday, I might have a snowfall forecast out for the storm. So just a couple more days, we'll get a lot more details within those next 2 or 3 days. So that's when I'll be issuing my snowfall forecast, and I'll probably have a couple more updates on this system, assuming that the models still are showing it within the next couple of days. So we have a lot to get into. Let's start off with our weather photo of the day. This was sent in by Alex. There's actually a couple more, which we'll flip to in just a moment. These were taken from Yonkers, New York, on Monday during and around the time of the nor'easter. So the one on the right-hand side of the screen, I believe this was probably taken either at night or in the morning. I'm not sure whether this was sunrise or sunset, but you can definitely see that the sun was creating a little bit more of the orange haze, and you mix that in with a completely overcast sky, and it does make for a pretty cool picture where you have the orange or yellow sky. You can also see some of the moss and just the kind of wet rock which you have over here on the left hand side from all that rain, and then if we look at the next couple here, these are both from around the nor'easter, I believe. The one on the left-hand side showing you the clouds, which you can see, of course. During that nor'easter, we were seeing a lot more overcast conditions. You really didn't see too many super dark clouds. It was mainly just kind of a blank gray slate and then a ton of rain, which is falling. When you did get into some of those heavier rain pockets, even on satellite imagery, you could definitely see that some of these clouds were a little bit more intense and a little bit darker. But for the most part, it's a fairly blank and kind of gray few days for most of those spots. And then on the right hand side, you can see a close-up, and unfortunately the resolution isn't too good because when I transfer it over into these slides, it doesn't get the full quality of the image. So the actual file looks much more high definition than this does right here. But anyway, you can see that it does show kind of a little bit of a sparkle on it because of the rain. You have that little mist or dew which is still on those leaves. So thank you to Alex for sending that in from Yonkers, New York. If you have any pictures that you want to send in related to the weather, send them over to my email address, which is elitheweatherguyyt@gmail.com. It's right here at the bottom right hand part of the screen. It's also in the description down below. I pick one person every day that we do have some photos in, and I pick them and I put it in the beginning of the video. So whenever we get photos sent in, pretty much that same day or the day after, you'll be featured in the video. And especially I think once we get into the snowfall events, once we get some of those, and I think we'll get a lot more submissions right around then, because right now we don't have a lot of weather to talk about that you can really take a picture of. You can't really take a picture of a cold day because you can't really take a picture of a temperature, but you can take pictures of things like snow and things like that. So I think once we start getting more of that, we'll have a few more submissions. If you ever do get any snow or ice or anything that you want to send in, again, feel free to just send over an email and send in the approximate area from where you're from. So you don't have to be like Alex and send in, if you don't feel comfortable, you don't have to send in the exact town name, but say just a general part of what state you're in. So in Alex's case, you could have just said Southern New York, and that would have also been fine. I just want a general location because it does help me a little bit with the analysis of the pictures. So let's get into it with the National Weather Service page. Now, we do have currently quite a few warnings up. We have some wind advisories for parts of South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Colorado, Oklahoma, Texas, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. So quite a few states. We also have them up for parts of Montana and Washington. So a fairly good part of the country is dealing with some wind advisories currently in place. We have some red flag warnings up for 12 counties in Texas, and then we also have some avalanche warnings in effect for parts of Washington and Oregon in the Cascades. So those areas are dealing with mountain snow and then lower elevation rainfall in Washington state as well, where we have those flood watches. We also do have some flood watches and flood advisories up for parts of Virginia, Maryland, Delaware. I believe that also covers DC and also a little bit of New Jersey as well, with those flood advisories and flood watches. And then we have a tornado watch up for central Florida as of right now. Now, yesterday we had a high temperature of 97 degrees tied between McAllen, Texas and Falcon Lake, Texas. The low temperature was also tied between Berthoud Pass, Colorado and Wolf Creek Pass, Colorado. And then we had a highest rainfall report in Shirley, New York, where they got 3.75 inches of rain. High snowfall report was 6 miles east of Skyway, Colorado, as well as 17 miles southeast of Burgess Junction, Wyoming. Both of them got approximately 10 inches of snowfall reported yesterday. So overall, a fairly active weather day, both in the form of temperatures and also in the form of precipitation and rain and snow. Now we're going to start to talk about some of that rain and snow right now. This is the European model. This one is more aggressive than what the GFS is showing, and we're going to show you both of these models. So starting off with the Euro, you're going to have this little system, which by this point is right around here. So it's a fairly weak system, just sliding down the spine of the Rockies at this point. And as it does so, it's going to interact with a very strong high pressure system, which is kind of bringing in some cold air to the northern plains. So this is by Sunday night when this would first start to occur. So we're dealing with some amount of rain and snow, but really nothing too crazy. So you can watch your Sunday night football in peace, not really dealing with any rain or snow. But as you get into the morning hours of Monday, you might start to deal with a few more issues, especially if you're going up into northern Colorado, even into some of the plains, where you will have some rain and snow and maybe even some ice mixing in. It's still not really that bad by Monday morning. Now, we are starting to see some mixing over a fairly wide area of Colorado, Wyoming, and Nebraska. I know I have a couple viewers from not only Nebraska, but also from Colorado in this part of the state. So for you guys, you will be dealing with some amount of mixing. I think more of the solid heavy snowfall or moderate snowfall, depending on how strong the storm is going to come by Monday evening and Tuesday morning. So still too warm by Monday afternoon. Now, we were looking at potentially some snow mixing in by Monday morning, maybe Sunday night, and that's because in this area it would have been a few degrees colder. But now that you're dealing with the early afternoon temperatures, this is really the hottest part of the day. Now you're dealing with this snow line, the rain snow line, pushing a little bit further to the northwest. So during the day, it will probably be a little bit more rainy, especially for a lot of you guys in southern Nebraska, the rest of Colorado, Kansas, but those areas further to the northwest will be in the snow zone. And then once you get into the overnight hours, you get into the colder temperatures, and you now start to see more of that light and moderate snow starting to mix in for Nebraska, Colorado, Wyoming. So you are dealing with some of these areas in especially southeastern Wyoming and western Nebraska getting hit with some of that snow. By this point, areas like Scotts Bluff would be right on that rain-snow line. North Platte, Nebraska would be somewhere in and around that rain-snow line, but still probably a few degrees too warm at this point. You guys will start to get into the snow as we get into Tuesday. So here's Tuesday morning, still mainly rainfall. It starts to break apart, but what the European model does, which is different from the GFS, is that it reforms the system. So you can see that we start to see this initial wave push down to the south, but you do get another resurgence from a wave that moved on to the Pacific coast and now is in the Rockies that starts to kind of bring a little bit more life to this system. So here's Tuesday early afternoon for many of these areas, and you're dealing dealing with some snow in Nebraska, Colorado, and Wyoming. It then starts to push further to the south as we get to Tuesday evening and Wednesday morning of next week. And again, this is the part where the European really is much more different than the GFS, because the GFS simply shows that first wave dive in from the Rockies and then move out. So you start to see maybe a couple inches in these areas, but really nothing more than 4 or 5 in some spots. But with this system, you would definitely be getting a few areas maybe receiving over a foot of snowfall if this were to be the case. And again, we don't know that that will be the case. The European tends to maybe be a little bit more dramatic in how much snowfall is actually going to occur, and it does like to rev things up a little bit more than what actually happens. So I'm going to lean with the GFS, but for right now, we're going to look at the European just for the hourly rainfall and snowfall. But we're also going to show you what the GFS shows for snowfall. So you can see that by Wednesday morning, European model bringing in for western Kansas, western Nebraska, much of Colorado, even into northern Utah, especially for the mountains, dealing with some snowfall at this point, and that continues mainly lighter snowfall, especially as you get out into some of the plains. So in areas like Nebraska, Kansas, Colorado, you're dealing with a wet snowfall, but it's also going to be extremely light by this point. Here's your 32-degree line, by the way. So this is by Wednesday early afternoon. So it's going to be a rather chilly day compared to normal, but still, your 32-degree line only covers the area northwest of this area, according to the European model. So even these areas, which are kind of in the middle right over here, are going to be dealing with a very wet and heavy snowfall of anything that does actually accumulate. And again, accumulation is not a guarantee with this, because even though some of these models might print out 10 inches or 12 inches for a spot like right here, maybe only 4 or 5 or 6 inches of that actually does stick to the ground, because you need to get that initial layer of snowfall. Now, I've seen this a lot, especially in some of the snowstorms around my area, where you need to get that initial maybe half an inch of snowfall onto some of these surfaces. It might be snowing for 30 minutes and you really don't get too much, but once you get that initial coating of snowfall, a lot more of that snow can pile on top of there. So the hardest part about this in an area like western Kansas and western Nebraska is going to be getting that initial dusting of snowfall. But once you get that, anything additional, anything else that does fall is going to be much more likely to stick and will probably not melt as frequently as it would if you were just having that land on grass or concrete. So it looks like this is going to be one of those cases where, again, whenever you get that initial layer of snow, if that happens maybe an hour into the system, then you're probably set for a fairly decent thumping, according to the European. But if that happens maybe 4 or 5 hours into the storm, well, now you've cut your snowfall potential maybe by a quarter, maybe by a third, or even a half of what you could possibly see. So this is going to be something that you really want to think about when you're talking about this forecast. It's not just going to be what these models output, and that's a mistake that a lot of people make. They look at these models, they see the snowfall numbers, and then they think, well, this model was completely wrong. But in reality, look at the temperature map, and it was actually quite accurate. So I would say you live northwest of this line, for the most part, you'll have decent enough accumulation amounts, but you get south and east of there, you're going to have trouble getting that to stick at first. So I think that might cut off some accumulation numbers. Now, that does slide to the south by Wednesday evening, but I'm not going to go any further because, again, it is getting far out there by this point, and I don't want to be too out there, and I don't want to be too inaccurate when it comes to this, because once you get, I think, past 5 days with a snowstorm, it does become a little bit more unreliable. So we're going to cut it off there, and we're just going to look at these snowfall maps, not really for the numbers, because I really don't care at this point to see whether one area sees 20 inches of snow in the mountains or maybe 10 inches in western Kansas, because I know that not all of that is going to stick. Again, even if you see 10 inches right here, maybe cut that in half. Maybe you only get 5 inches of snowfall, even if the European was 100% correct when it comes to when the snowfall comes in, what the temperatures are. Even if the European is 100% correct, which it probably is not, then you would still probably want to cut that in half, or maybe by a couple inches, because, again, not all of that is going to stick to most surfaces. You can see where the bulk of the snow is, and you can see it's mainly down in Colorado and Kansas, and that's because because the storm intensified on the European model when you had that initial wave come down into Missouri and then the next wave come in from the Pacific. And that next wave was a little bit further south because, again, this is going to be a little bit more complicated, but when the first low pressure system came down, it was kind of holding in this high pressure in place. So the high pressure could not move any further south than about right here. So this system was just kind of riding the southern extent of the high pressure system. But as this low pressure kind of went further to the south, that allowed the high pressure to move a little bit further south. So now the second wave is coming in and it's riding the southern extent of the high pressure, but at this point that's a little bit further to the south than what the initial low pressure system took. So it is a little bit more complicated, but that is mainly why the second wave is coming in at a more southern area than the initial one, because of where that high pressure is positioned by that point. So it will be colder, but it also means that snow in an area like South Dakota might be cut off more than an area like Kansas if the European model is correct, because that high pressure system is starting to migrate further to the south. Now here's the GFS, and you can see a big difference. So I'm just going to kind of flip back and forth here over the next couple of seconds here, and you can see that we do have a quite big difference between the Euro and the GFS. The GFS model really honing in on Nebraska, Wyoming, and Colorado. And right now, if I'm looking at this, I think the GFS is going to be more accurate than the European, because it's not showing these crazy amounts. And with the upgrades that the GFS has taken over the summer, they've done some upgrades to how the computer model actually inputs and outputs some of that data. I do think it's a lot more of a useful model. 2 or 3 years ago, I would not be saying that, because the GFS was really looked down at. It was mainly looked at as the little brother to the European model, but in the past few years, it really has taken a big step forward in becoming a better forecasting model. So I think by this point, again, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I barely looked at the GFS really because it was not too accurate, and I mostly focused in on the Euro. But at this point, the GFS is a fairly decent and good model, and even in some respects, it's actually better than the European model, which I think has actually been a little bit worse when it comes to forecasting these type of systems recently. So right now I'm betting on the GFS being a little bit more accurate. I don't know if this second resurgence and the second wave that the European model is showing is actually going to happen. So right now I would stick more with what the GFS is showing. Again, it's showing snow all the way to eastern Nebraska. I don't think anything is really going to accumulate once you get basically west, or once you get east of this line. I really don't think there's going to be much accumulation. I think it's just going to be too warm. So even though you might see an inch on your area of the state, you will probably see some snow coming down from the sky, but in reality, not a lot of that is going to stick. So you're going to probably have more luck in western Nebraska, northern Colorado, southeastern Wyoming with getting some of that snow. And it looks like there could be even a band of 1 to 3 inches of snowfall, locally higher amounts, especially in higher elevations of Colorado and Wyoming. So that is going to wrap it up for today's video. I'm thinking that I'll have a couple more updates on the system, and by Saturday or Sunday, again, just depending on when I'm able to do it, I'll probably have a snowfall forecast out for this event. And again, that's only going to apply if this event is still being forecasted. So if in the next 24 hours after I make this video completely is taken off these models and we're not really expecting anything, then of course I'm not going to make another video or forecast on that. But I don't think that's going to happen quite like that. I think we will still see some amount of snow. It's just how much and where that's really puzzling us right now, especially with the big difference between the Euro and the GFS model. So again, that is going to wrap it up. If you want to send in your weather photos like Alex did today, then you can go over to my email address. Just type that in, or you can click on the link in the bottom of the description down below and just send in approximately where that was from. Again, nothing specific, but just say a general part of the state that you're from, or where that picture was taken from, and then just send that in with the pictures attached, and I'll feature you in the beginning of that video. So again, if you have any photos, send those in. I always love seeing them because it really is great to see how some of these weather events actually played out. Now, of course, I can forecast them, but of course, I don't have the opportunity to go and and actually look at some of these snowstorms in person that are happening halfway across the country. So you guys sending in the photos really does give me a good idea of what actually happened on the ground, and it can actually help me forecast a little bit better. So again, thank you for everyone who has already sent in those photos, and anyone who's thinking about sending them in. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. I'll be responding within a few hours of you posting them, and I'll see you guys in tomorrow's video. Goodbye.